This is an attempt, a very clear, very bloody attempt, to impose Islamic blasphemy law in France and across Europe. And it has to be stopped. That's why these men did it. That's why the journalists of Charlie Hebdo are dead. An attempt to impose Islamic blasphemy law in Paris.
Today's highlight features Douglas Murray in a heated debate where he leaves a Muslim scholar struggling to respond. This debate took place shortly after the tragic murder of a French journalist by Muslim extremists, provoked by a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. Central to this discussion is the tragic event of the Charlie Hebdo massacre, a stark reminder of the tensions between free expression and religious sensitivity. As we all remember, a duo of Muslim terrorists, the Kouachi brothers, stormed the offices of the satirical magazine and gunned down 12 people, including the editor, in retaliation for publishing cartoons mocking the Prophet Muhammad, which is considered to be an extreme form of blasphemy in the Islamic culture. These people seem to forget that they're living in free, secular democracies of Europe, where individuals have a right to freedom of expression, and not their own radically religious homelands, which are notorious for human rights violations. It was a brutal assault on the core Western value of free speech. This incident ignited a fierce discussion about whether certain Muslim communities can truly integrate into liberal countries like France, given their adherence to fundamentalist interpretations of Islam. As Douglas rightly points out, this isn't just about cartoons. It's about the attempt to impose religious blasphemy laws on secular societies, undermining free speech. The question is, why should one religion be free from criticism when secular free societies allow open discussion about all beliefs? And why does the elite refuse to see this? Is it political correctness or something more sinister? Douglas further educates the audience about how these acts pose a serious threat to their very rights to freedom of speech.
The problem is that unless you have an I am Spartacus, as you say, tactic on it, it's not worth any one individual or any one, well, let's put it this way, no one publication doing it, because, you know, after the Danish cartoons affair, Charlie Hebdo was the only paper in the world, really, that continued to say it is our right as secular French citizens to draw, lampoon, laugh at, write about whatever we want. We're free people in a free society. So that's why I've suggested this week, repeated what Ayaan Hirsi Ali said after the Danish cartoons affair. We have to spread the risk around. The free press in the free world has to spread the risk around. Our freedoms hang on this. It cannot be left to a single individual or a single publication, a single satirical magazine, to hold the line for all of our freedom.
We'll be back to Douglas in a sec. A very crucial point Douglas makes here is how there are not many defendants of freedom of speech against such radical and harsh ideologies. Charlie Hebdo was the only publication that clung onto their right to freely lampoon Islamic beliefs after the Danish cartoon conspiracy, which arose from the publication of cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad in a Danish newspaper in 2005, leading to global protests, violent reactions, and several deaths. Douglas urges to spread the risk around. We cannot leave it onto a single magazine to be our thin line of defense against those who seek to take our freedom away from us. Rather, there should be collective action to take a stand against such violent ideologies. The issue isn't merely isolated incidents of violence either. It's about the broader, more insidious objective of curtailing freedom of expression. As Douglas rightly points out, the core of this issue is freedom itself, which is under threat from those who wish to impose a different set of fundamentalist values upon liberal Western societies. We're dealing with issues unseen for centuries. The Charlie Hebdo killings, the Bataclan massacre, the truck attacks in Nice and Berlin. These aren't isolated incidents, but the inevitable consequences of importing millions of Muslims with values antithetical to Western liberal democracy. Douglas lambasts the leaders who allowed this problem to grow and who seem wholly unconcerned about the consequences. Murray's call for solidarity among free thinkers and the press is a powerful statement. If the burden of defending free speech falls on a few brave individuals or publications, they become easy targets for those seeking to silence dissent. By spreading the risk, the free world can collectively uphold this fundamental right. But even in the face of such savagery, there were still those trying to make excuses and deflect from the real issue of Islamic intolerance. According to Douglas's Muslim opponent, the real issue isn't about free speech or extremism, it's about respecting religious sensitivities. Douglas takes him to task and dismantles his arguments in the process.
Yeah, because I disagree with everything he said so far, because...
Everything?
Yeah, most of what he said, because I stopped listening after a while because it just didn't make sense. When he talks about we should, the news, Charlie Hebdo published whatever they wanted, that's rubbish. They were overtly racist towards Muslims. They were always lampooning Arabs and being overtly racist in most of their publications, and it smacks of hypocrisy because they were prepared, in the name of freedom of speech, to sack a journalist who wrote a column that they considered to be anti-Semitic. So how come there's a line there, but when it comes to Muslims, it doesn't matter, take it on the chin. Why are we treated differently from others?
A dozen people were killed, and they're now being smeared as racists, like this gentleman here. And I think that's intolerable.
No, I did not.
He clearly knows nothing about Charlie Hebdo.
I just gave you an example.
Nothing about France, nothing about French traditions of free speech. Charlie Hebdo is a left-wing, anti-racist publication. It has lampooned and does lampoon everybody. In recent years, it has taken particular delight in lampooning. Most of the attacks on Charlie Hebdo, the non-physical attacks, have been from the Catholic Church, repeated attempts to criminalize Charlie Hebdo for what it says about the Pope. Marine Le Pen, the far right-wing leader, is one of the main targets of their satire. You don't understand anything.
Douglas was able to see right through Raza's hypocrisy and lack of knowledge about what he's talking about. Raza tries to play the victim here, complaining that it is always Muslims who are the target of publications such as Charlie Hebdo, who, according to Raza's argument, weaponize freedom of speech and use this as a mask for hate speech. However, Douglas completely butchers his argument with not baseless claims, but with facts. Douglas demonstrates how Raza is clearly not educated enough to even speak on the topic with just one fact. Charlie Hebdo lampoons and satirizes everyone, including the Pope and even French politicians. It is evident that Muslims overlook how criticism does not apply to just them, but rather to everyone. Or, as Douglas masterfully sums it up in just one sentence,
that's this. What is going on with this is an attempt not to make Islam be treated differently, and not making Charlie Hebdo. It wasn't to treat Islam differently or Muhammad. It was to treat Islam exactly the same way that secular free people have the right to talk about every religion.
This one sentence from Douglas alone completely demolishes the entire argument of the Muslim apologists. They fail to realize that it is not them who are being treated unfairly or even differently. This is merely the price they must be ready to pay for living in a country that values freedom over petty sensitivities. Muslims need to realize that Islam does not operate under special rules, and they should accept that they're merely being treated the same as others and have no right to a special privilege that protects their religious sensitivities. As Douglas pointed out earlier, even the Catholic Church is not a fan of Charlie Hebdo for what it says and publishes about the Pope himself. However, it is only Muslims that commit such vast and barbaric terroristic acts in retaliation to simply being offended. This, once again, brings us back to one of the main questions. Can Muslims truly be integrated into liberal Western societies? Is it achievable considering the vast differences between these two clashing, arguably complete polar opposite cultures? Do Muslims, being the immigrant minority, seeking to change the very fabric of their liberal and secular host nations, count as cultural imposition? Next up, we see Raza being asked the same question.
Douglas touches on this. France has a long, some would say fantastic, certainly very proud tradition of vulgar and rude and anti-religious cartoons. Isn't it a cultural imposition for a minority to seek to change that?
Muslims are
Answer that question.
In France, in 2006, a rapper was prosecuted for saying, "I want to urinate on Napoleon." So where's this, in believing in a person, we can offend whoever we want? It's rubbish. Muslims are being asked to believe in freedom of speech more than others are, because in France they're prepared to prosecute an individual on that basis. They've banned comedians that they consider to be anti-Semitic. Now I'm saying it's right, if someone's being anti-Semitic, stop them. But why, when we're saying someone is being Islamophobic and anti-Muslim, we're saying, well, take it on the chin. Why are we treated differently?
If it's unacceptable, as many people feel it is, many people find it deeply offensive to see cartoons of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. Is there any way in which it is acceptable to poke fun at Islam?
If you want to poke fun, no one really cares. But the thing is, this isn't about poking fun.
We're not talking about cartoons. Is there any way?
Well, no, hang on. No, this wasn't about poking fun. This case is being painted as a freedom of speech issue, and it's clearly linked to the war on terror. If you look at the cartoon, the killers, what they say, we're part of Al Qaeda. It wasn't a cartoon that riled them up. It was foreign policy and a war on terror.
Why?
The Muslim scholar is clearly seen deviating from the actual topic of discussion and completely sidelines the actual question. Instead of accepting the truth as it is, that Muslims seeking to change Western culture to accommodate their own comforts is clearly cultural imposition. The Muslim scholar instead argues that it is only Muslims who suffer due to freedom of speech. As pointed out in the clip, Western countries and French tradition in particular take pride in poking fun and lampooning against religions and figures of authority, regardless of their background. Just as non-Muslims in Muslim countries, even the tourists, are forced to partake in actions that align with the Muslim culture, conform to their laws and traditions, such as women covering themselves and couples refraining from expressing affection in public, Muslims must also respect, or at least tolerate, the traditions their host countries take pride in. In most Muslim countries, a failure to conform to Islamic traditions, even by non-Muslims and tourists, results in serious penalties. These harsh practices of imposing harsh punishments onto those who do not conform to Muslim beliefs have now been imported into European countries. Feeling offended is no excuse for going on a killing spree, a murder rampage, and the Muslim scholar brushes these acts of extremism and the deaths of innocents by trying to make the argument about freedom of speech instead of addressing what it really is, terrorism. He further claims that no one really cares when asked about whether or not poking fun at Islam is all right. The hypocrisy is insane. Now let's hear what Douglas has to say.
One thing you may not be aware of, but it's worth throwing into the discussion, is that there are laws on the continent, particularly to do with anti-Semitism and particularly to do with the Holocaust. And let me just explain, because you may again not know this, but the historical reasons for that. France has historical reasons to be incredibly sensitive of anti-Semitism in particular, because within people's living memory, tens of thousands of Jews were put on trains and slaughtered.
So we shouldn't be sensitive of Islamophobia?
No, let me explain.
Well, we shouldn't be sensitive of it. There's a secret website called Google. If you go on there, you can look at other examples where France has been very hypocritical.
There are very specific reasons. There are very specific reasons. There are very specific reasons in France and Germany why some of those laws exist. But
Douglas's response feels like a breath of fresh air after listening to the Muslim scholar's hypocrisy. Douglas once again proves the Muslim scholar lacks knowledge about the very basic context of the sensitivity when it comes to anti-Semitism, namely the Holocaust. It's within people's living memory, the brutal genocide by the Nazis that cost the lives of millions of Jews on French soil. Furthermore, Raza Nadim's argument conflates two fundamentally different concepts, race and religion. Race is an immutable characteristic determined by one's biological makeup and ancestral heritage. Individuals cannot choose or change their ethnic background. Anti-Semitic acts target individuals based on their ethnic origin, which they have no control over. This targeting is inherently discriminatory and serves no purpose other than to demean and marginalize. Religion, however, is a set of beliefs and practices. Unlike race, religion involves personal choice. People can adopt, change, or renounce religious beliefs, and criticism of religion is a criticism of an ideology, ideas, and personal choices, not an attempt to demonize and marginalize individuals based on their inherent characteristics.
What they do is try to make one religion free from being able to be criticized, and it must be stopped.
Douglas Murray's forceful defense of free speech against the imposition of blasphemy laws is a rallying cry for Western democracies. While respecting individual beliefs, a free society must uphold the right to critique and even mock ideas without fear of violent reprisal. By standing united in this principle, we can preserve the open exchange of ideas that fuels social progress. Murray and others argue that questioning and mocking ideas, including religious beliefs, is vital for an open society, and the attempt to make just one religion immune to that is ridiculous. Satire, a powerful tool for critiquing power structures and norms, has historically driven social and political reform, as seen with Enlightenment figures like Voltaire. Modern satire holds public figures accountable and stimulates discourse. Though hate speech laws in many Western countries prevent incitement to violence, They don't shield beliefs from critique. The key is balancing protection against harm while allowing scrutiny of ideas. Criticizing beliefs through satire isn't hate speech, but a democratic necessity, fostering continual societal improvement. But what do you think? Is criticizing a religion with followers that treat the religion as the very foundation of their existence perhaps a bit too much? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in seeing more of Douglas Murray tackling extremists and apologists while armed with nothing but pure logic, subscribe to our channel.